Welcome to another boring history video. The kind of boring story you won't want to miss. Unless, of course, you happen to fall asleep halfway through. This is Boring History for Sleep, a gentle storytelling space for soft-spoken documentaries, ambient sounds, and slow, thoughtful narration. The kind of relaxing history to fall asleep to, where each whisper of the past is softened like candlelight on stone walls. If you've been searching for a boring history sleeper, a boring history channel, or simply a boring story to unwind with, you're in the right place. Tonight, we wander back, slowly, quietly, to a time when life moved at the pace of hoes and hand tools. A time of mud paths, thatched roofs, and soft flickers of firelight behind oil parchment windows. This is the boring history to fall asleep to, told with care, calm, and just enough curiosity to let your mind drift freely across the folds of time. We'll explore a world not shaped by kings or knights or great battles, but by the silent, unseen rhythm of the medieval peasant, those who woke before sunrise, labored through damp fields, and ended their days under straw roofs with aching limbs and empty bowls. It's a history not of glory, but of quiet resilience, of calloused hands and muddy hems, of cold floors and warm bread. And perhaps, as the soft sounds of the past rise like distant wind through the hedgerows, you'll find yourself gently lulled into the kind of sleep only boring history can offer. So settle in, rest your head, and imagine yourself walking the worn path between cottage and field as we begin tonight's soft-spoken history sleep story. You won't believe how hard life was for a medieval peasant. The morning began not with a jolt, but with the quiet, creeping light that seeped through the slits of the wooden shutters. There were no alarm bells in a medieval village, only the subtle shift in bird song and the distant, rhythmic clink of a neighbor already stirring his coals. The warmth of the straw mattress was thin, and the chill of dawn still clung to the packed dirt floor. Imagine yourself lying beneath a ruffled blanket, your breath just visible in the cold spring air. The only light is a glow of a few fading embers tucked into the hearth. The thatched roof above you crackles gently with the weight of morning dew. Somewhere nearby, a chicken shuffles in its corner. You rise slowly, joints stiff, shoulders cold. There are no slippers, only the floor. Your shift is coarse linen. Your hands are already calloused, and the day has barely begun. Breakfast, if one can call it that, is a simple hunk of coarse barley bread, baked 3 days ago, and now quite hard. Maybe some ale, weak and soured slightly, but safe enough to drink. Water, if available, is boiled the night before and must last. The fire must be coaxed back to life before anything else. With a bit of dried moss or last season's straw, you blow gently into the coals. A faint ember flares orange. The flames will warm your hands, just for a moment. There is no rush, and yet the day's rhythm waits for no one. Tools must be gathered. The oxen must be checked. If you're lucky, the plow still works and the handle hasn't split from the frost. Children are already beginning to stir. The youngest ones whimper under thin cloth. Their small bodies curl up tight to trap warmth. The older ones mumble about chores. There are no schools, no books. Their classroom is a field. You slip your feet into leather wraps or thick wool scraps tied with twine. Shoes, if you even have a pair, are too valuable for wet fields. The air outside is cool, damp, and smells of turned earth and smoke. The birds, wrens, finches, jackdaws, have been up longer than you. A soft mist clings to the ground, and in the distance, the manor bell tolls once. Not for you, not directly, but it's time to work. There's a rhythm to this, the rhythm of survival, of doing what must be done, of pushing back hunger with movement and cold with motion. Your neighbor waves from the path, half asleep, already muddy. The two of you exchange a grunt. That's enough talk for now. And so begins the day, slow, quiet, muddy, and cold. but somehow calm, somehow alive. By midday, the village breathes with the slow pulse of work. The soft hush of morning has given way to a quiet hum, not of industry, but of survival. In the fields beyond the cottages, men and women labor beneath a pale sky. The sun is no more than a weak disk behind drifting clouds, and yet it warms the skin just enough to stir sweat beneath woolen tunics. The earth is heavy and dark, turred with wooden plows and handheld forks. Imagine the weight of damp soil sticking to your boots, or what passes for them. Your hands are caked with mud, but you hardly notice. The rhythm of movement becomes a kind of meditation. Dig, lift, pat, pull. Children help where they can, gathering sticks, chasing off crows, carrying water in clay jugs slung from frayed ropes. Some are barefoot, most are underfed, but all are woven into the routine of the day, like threads in a fraying cloth. Lunch, if it comes, is eaten quickly, seated on a stone wall or beside a tree. There is no formal pause, no long rest. Perhaps a bowl of pottage, a warm stew of leeks, onions, cabbage, and a hint of yesterday's barley. If meat is added, it's only scraps. More likely, you taste herbs and boiled roots. No plates, no silver. The bowl is shared, the spoon passed between mouths. It is not a meal, it is fuel, and then it's back to work. A woman gathers hay for thatching. Her fingers move with memory, tying tight bundles, twisting reeds. Another tends the sheep, watching their hooves sink into the softened ground. The forest edge looms in the distance, a place of fuel and fear. Wood is gathered for fire, but only from fallen branches. Cutting down trees can mean fines, or worse, the forest belongs to the Lord. A distant bell sounds again. It means little here. Your stomach is a better clock, and today it's mostly empty. Still, there's a calm in this. The quiet focus of hands that know what to do. The steady ache of muscles that belong to the land. No one talks much. Words are saved. But glances, nods, shared shrugs. They say enough. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across furrowed roads. And though the work is far from done, you can almost feel the shape of evening approaching. As the sun lowers behind the hedgerows and the pale orange glow settles on the fields, the village begins to exhale, not with celebration, but with relief. The day's labor is nearly done. Tools are rinsed in shallow streams, hung in sheds, or leaned carefully against stone walls. Oxen, if you are fortunate enough to work with them, are led back to their stalls, fed a meager portion of hay. Their breath hangs like mist in the cooling air. You walk slowly back toward your home, legs sore, hands raw, eyelids heavy. Your path winds past others like you, each wrapped in wool and silence. No one speaks of the toil. It is understood. Inside the cottage, there is still work to do. Water must be fetched from the well. The fire must be rebuilt. A few coals remain beneath the ash. You cradle them gently with fresh twigs, breathing life into warmth. The children, if they're old enough, help peel root vegetables or stir the pot. The younger ones chase each other with clumsy joy, their laughter muffled by thick walls of wattle and daub. The meal, like the day, is simple: boiled turnips, stale bread, perhaps a sliver dried cheese. The stew from lunch is stretched thinner, flavored with herbs hung months ago. If the hens have laid, there might be an egg to share. If not, no one is surprised. Evening prayers are whispered, not out of strict piety, but out of habit. A few words mumbled in Latin, a crossing of the chest, a glance at the darkening sky. You sit near the fire, feet stretched out, the flicker casting shadows on the walls. You sew a small tear in your tunic. A child hums a melody, a lullaby her grandmother taught her. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling straw and whistling through cracks in the door. But inside, the glow is warm and golden. The floor is swept. The animals are quiet. The day is ending. There is no leisure, no hobby, no indulgence, but there is peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing nothing else. You lie down on the same straw mattress, beneath the same woolen cloth. You curl your legs in. The chill has crept back into the air. But so has the quiet. And though your body aches, there is a rhythm to this life, a simplicity, a softness, even in the hardship. Outside, the stars emerge over the low cottages, and within, the last candle flickers. Another day survived. She was not recorded in the Chronicles of Kings. No name survives for her. No paintings. No poems. Only a few patterns left in the earth where her cottage once stood. And perhaps a fragment of broken pottery that once held a broth too thin to remember. Still, we imagine her, a girl born in 1350, in the rolling hills of southern England, in the wake of one of the darkest years the land had ever known. The Black Death had passed, or so they hoped, leaving behind silence, fear, and more land and hands to work it. But she did not understand that. She was just a child. And for her, the world began not with death, but with mud, bread, and sky. She learned to walk on uneven floors, her toes tracing paths through straw and soot. She learned to speak from her mother's soft murmurs near the fire. And she learned to listen, always to listen, for the voices of geese, the bark of the steward, and the groan of the old gate in the wind. Her world was very small, a cottage with 3 rooms, 2 of which were always too cold, a father who rose before the sun, a mother with hands always busy, spinning wool, shaping bread, lifting buckets. She played with smooth stones and crooked dolls made of scraps. She helped feed the chickens, grind grain, gather herbs, and at night her mother told her stories, old ones, of saints and beasts and girls who danced with the wind. By the time she was 5, she had seen a lamb born and a man buried. By 6, she could sweep a floor and carry a pail. By 7, she knew what hunger felt like and how to hide it with a smile. She never attended a school, never held a book, but she was clever, quick with her hands and quiet with her thoughts. When the steward passed through the village, she would hide behind barrels, peeking with wide eyes at his leather boots and deep frown. She wondered what it would be like to live in a manor house, to wear clean linens and eat from smooth bowls. But she never asked. Questions were a luxury. Her childhood was brief, not in years, but in softness. By 8, she was working alongside her mother from dawn to dusk. Still, there was peace in it, a rhythm, the wind in the trees, the warmth of the dog curled near the hearth, the smell of apples drying near the window. Her world was hard, but it was hers, and she learned to live in it quietly, gently, one cold morning at a time. She became a woman not by ceremony, but by necessity. There were no birthday cakes, no grand transitions. Just one day, she was too tall for games and too strong to be idle. By 12, she could carry a full pail from the well without spilling. By 13, her fingers had memorized a rhythm of spinning, weaving, kneading. By 14, she was betrothed. His name is not known. He may have been kind. He may have been quiet. But she knew him from the village, from the fields, from the path that passed a river bend. There was no courtship, only approval from parents. From the steward, she wore a borrowed shift and a crown of dried flowers. The ceremony took place beneath a budding oak tree in early spring. Her new home was not far, a smaller cottage shared with in-laws. The walls were the same, wattled and daubed. The roof still leaked. The hearth still smoked. But now, she was the one tending it. She bore her first child within the year. A son, small, quiet, pale. He lived only 3 weeks. She wept silently in the garden, not because it was uncommon, but because it still hurt. She went back to work. The second child lived, a girl with dark eyes and a loud cry. She clung to life, to her mother's warmth, to the simple miracle of barley water and coarse linen. Seasons passed. Winters grew harsher. Fields flooded, then dried. And still, she worked. There were no days off, no long evenings. The rhythm of labor, of quiet endurance, never ceased. She mended shirts, salted cabbage, tended animals, gathered herbs, midwife neighbors, prepared the dead. Once, a neighboring cottage burned. She ran to help, dragging buckets, calling out names. The roof fell in any way. Another time, a traveling monk passed through the village, selling relics and tales. She listened from a distance, holding her daughter close. Some believed him. She simply smiled and offered bread. She knew what mattered and what didn't. Her husband grew older, slower. One winter, he did not rise. They buried him beneath the same oak tree. They married under. She wore a black shawl for a year, then used it to carry firewood. There were tears, but no time for grief. She had mouths to feed, fires to build, fields to tend. And so she did, and always the wind continued to move through the trees, soft, indifferent, eternal. The years passed not in events, but in repetitions. One season blurred into the next, marked only by harvests, storms, and births. The rhythms of village life wrapped themselves around her, like the linen kerchief she wore every day, tied, worn, retied. Her daughter grew tall, married, moved just 2 cottages away. Grandchildren arrived, one with her eyes, one with her quiet laugh. She found joy in simple things, warm wool drying near the hearth, fresh loaves cooling on the windowsill, a new hen's first egg, the way moonlight pooled in the bucket, left outside overnight. She no longer climbed the ladder to the loft. Her knees creaked like the cottage door, but still she swept. Still she sang under her breath. Still she remembered names, even when no one else did. The village changed slowly. A new steward arrived. A road was widened. One year, the manor roof was repaired. Another, a stranger passed through with a wagon full of mirrors. She caught a reflection, aged, lined, wise, and smiled, not with vanity, but with quiet surprise. She had lived, not grandly, not loudly, but deeply. And then, one winter evening, after supper warm broth and boiled roots, she lay down, closed her eyes, and did not wake. There was no written record, no monument, only a day of silence in the village, a few tears. A handful of herbs lay gently on a mound of earth. Years later, her cottage fell. The wood rotted, the roof sank, the garden went wild. But her story, though never written, lived on in the hands of her grandchildren, in the bread they baked, in the songs they hummed, in the path she wore into the earth from door, the field and back again. Today, archaeologists may find a shard of her pottery, a flattened spoon. They will speculate, measure, analyze, but they will never know her laugh. Yet now you do. You've seen her world, walked her path, and felt just faintly the rhythm of her life. And in this quiet imagining, she lives again. The peasants did not leave books. They left bones and broken pots. And from these silent fragments, we begin to listen, gently, carefully, without rushing the past. Imagine an archaeologist kneeling in a quiet English meadow. The grass is long. The air is still. She brushes away centuries of soil with the softest strokes, not to dig, but to reveal. And slowly, a piece of shaped flint appears. A spindle whorl, a tooth, a chicken bone with cut marks. Tiny things, unremarkable things, but each a whisper from someone's ordinary day. Bones tell us much, not just about death, but about life. Peasant skeletons often show curved spines, worn knees, and broken fingers healed out of place. Evidence of endless bending, lifting, hauling. Women's skeletons reveal the same. Labor was not spared by gender. Teeth worn flat from coarse bread, baked with grit. Rib cages thinned by years of poor nutrition. Some show signs of disease, rickets, scurvy, infections long endured. But there are also signs of healing, of strength, of resilience etched into the marrow. And then there are the tools, rarely pristine. A rusted sickle, a bent spoon, a cracked spindle wheel, crude by modern standards, but shaped perfectly for the hand that used them, used again and again, until they were more than objects. They were part of the rhythm. Post holes in the ground mark vanished homes, small square thatched with reeds, traces of walls, hearthstones cracked by 1,000 fires. Sometimes they find patterns, long-worn footpaths leading nowhere. But once, those paths led from door to field to well, worn by generations, by muddy feet, by the quiet work of living. A scatter of bones behind a cottage wall tells of a family pig, fed on scraps, loved perhaps, then eaten in winter. A child's tooth hidden in the floorboards, maybe placed there for luck. A bead once blue, now gray with age, dropped during a feast or lost during a song. Each fragment carries a story, but not a loud one, a murmur, a breath. The silence of centuries breaks only for those who kneel and listen. And though we cannot know every name, we come closer to their lives. In the modern world, you might not think twice about a cracked bowl or a patch of worn floor. But in archaeology, these are treasures. And in the case of medieval peasants, they're often the only voice that remains. Pottery, humble, simple, breakable, is one of the most telling artifacts we find. Peasant homes didn't have shelves lined with polished goods. Most families owned just a few clay bowls, a cooking pot, a pitcher, and a ladle. But in their shapes and patterns, there is history. Some pots were handmade, roughly pinched and fired in open hearths. Others came from local potters, and bear faint ridges from the wheel. The color of the clay tells us where it came from. The uneven glaze, or lack thereof, speaks of technique and temperature. Some pieces have marks, a thumbprint baked into the handle, a repaired crack sealed with pitch and wrapped in twine. In one excavation, archaeologists found a jug with soot on one side only, likely the side always placed toward the fire. From that detail, they imagined the layout of the hearth, the woman who stirred it, the child who fetched it. There's also what's not found. No fine metal cutlery, no glass, no elaborate carvings, only tools worn thin by use, and often used beyond repair. But even those tools whisper. A wooden spoon smoothed by years of stirring. A spindle whorl etched with a simple cross, a token of faith, or maybe just decoration. Patterns also emerge in the soil. Darkened patches where fires once burned. Shells crushed and spread across walkways. Straw mixed with clay to strengthen floors. A line of stones leading to a stream, worn not by storms, but by bare feet over decades. One dig revealed a series of footprints fossilized beneath a collapsed cottage. One belonged to a child. It showed a stumble, a moment frozen in time. No one knows what happened next. Even waste heaps offer stories. Layers of eggshells and fish bones, ashen wool, broken combs and cracked beads. They map the changing seasons, the rhythms of hunger and feast, the simple act of making do. Every pot shard, every scatter of nails, every faint imprint in the dirt is a thread, and when gently stitched together by quiet minds and careful hands, they become a tapestry. of lives once invisible, now softly seen. Imagine standing in an open field. The grass is tall, the earth is silent, but just beneath the surface, unseen, is a village. Not one with stone walls or castle towers, but one of thatched roofs, crooked fences, and well-trodden paths. A village once full of breath and bread, laughter and labor, and now, only shapes in the ground. This is the art of archaeological reconstruction, and it begins with patterns. Long before a spade hits the dirt, aerial photography and satellite scans reveal subtle changes in color. Darker soil where once rotted, lighter patches where pathways wore thin. From above, a vanished village begins to emerge like a faded ink drawing. Then comes the groundwork. Excavation reveals the outlines of long-lost structures. You might find rows of post holes, markers for the beams that once held up a home. A circular patch of ash and bone, likely a cooking fire. A ditch, perhaps used to drain rainwater, or to separate livestock. Even the distance between houses tells a story. Some villages were dense, crowded, built with survival in mind. Others were spaced out, with small gardens, orchards, and communal grazing fields. Artifacts are rarely glamorous. Fragments of combs, rusted knives, bits of iron nails. But when placed in context within the footprint of home, they become anchors of identity. Here is a corner where a family slept. Here, a place where bread was kneaded. Here, a well, its stone still cool to the touch, once served 20 households. Sometimes, a single cottage is excavated entirely. Inside, archaeologists find layers, time frozen in sediment. A charred floor suggests a fire. A collapsed roof beam warped by time. Mouse bones near a grain sack. And always, broken pots. From these details, entire rhythms of life are reimagined. How many lived here? What did they eat? Did they raise chickens, goats, or both? Even gaps in the record matter. A missing corner suggests a door. A change in soil density may reveal a sleeping loft. And beyond the homes, the fields. Medieval peasants often worked communal strips, long, narrow plots shared by the village. Traces of these furrows can still be seen today, gently rising and falling like the breath of the land itself. As each discovery is logged, mapped, and modeled, the village rises once more, not in stone or timber, but in drawings, models, and quiet reconstructions, in museum dioramas, in virtual simulations, in the minds of those who listen for stories beneath the grass. And though the cottages may never be rebuilt, in this way, the people are remembered, the soil speaks, and we, centuries later, finally hear them. At first glance, the manor and the cottage might seem to share the same world. They sit in the same fields, hear the same birds, feel the same frost, but in reality, they were as distant as stars. The peasant's day began with aching limbs and a cold floor. The Lord's day began with silence and warmth. Inside the manor, thick tapestries lined the walls, not just for decoration, but insulation. Candles flickered in wrought iron holders. Dogs lay on woven rushes. Bread was white, sweetened with honey or fruit. Breakfast was optional for the nobility, but often served. Cheese, eggs, maybe dried meats, all carried on pewter plates by hands that bowed before leaving the room. The peasant's breakfast? If any, it was coarse bread dipped in broth, eaten standing while stoking a fire. Where the peasant labored to grow oats, the lord dined on venison, swan, or boar, often not hunted by him, but provided as tax or tribute. At the great table, meals were loud, social affairs. Musicians played, stories were told, and between courses, bowls of rose water were passed around for rinsing fingers. Back in the cottage, dinner was simpler. A pot of pottage, boiled greens, onions, barley, maybe a scrap of salted meat. if fortune smiled. Children sat on the floor. Plates were wooden, spoons shared. And yet, both meals fed families. Both were made with care. The kitchen in the manor might house multiple servants. A spit boy, a cook, a steward, and a scullion. The peasant kitchen was a hearth, shared with smoke, livestock, and cold air. Cleanliness, too, marked contrast. Manors had basins, servants to fetch hot water, perhaps even perfumed cloths. Peasants washed with stream water, or none at all in winter. And yet, even the Lord grew cold when the fires died down. Even he shivered when the wind pressed against the stone. Despite wealth, they too lived in a fragile world. The same rains that flooded the fields soaked his hall. The same plague crept over both thresholds. But unlike the peasant, the Lord could leave to another manor, another town, another kingdom. The peasant remained, tethered to land, to debt, to labor. Still, not all was bitterness. There were moments of connection, a feast day shared, a kindness from a lady, a wedding gift from the manor kitchen. But these were the exceptions, not the rule. The gap between bowl and banquet remained wide, and though both lives passed beneath the same sky, the stars looked very different from each window. For most of the year, the days of medieval peasant were filled with repetition. Work, hunger, cold, and sleep. But not always. There were moments, bright, short-lived, like lanterns in the fog, when life paused, when joy took root in muddy streets, and music, for once, outshouted labor. Feast days, holy days, saints' days. The medieval calendar was dotted with them, and peasants clung to these celebrations as gently as they clung to the harvest. Some were solemn, others merry. All were welcomed. On such days, the bells rang early, not for toil, but for gathering. Church services came first, a steady rhythm of incense and chant, stone and scripture. But afterward, the village came alive. Morris dancers with bells at their ankles, children chasing ribbons in the wind, vendors setting up rough tables of pies, nuts, ale, and sweets. Men and women dressing in their best, often still patched, but brightened with herbs, beads, or a borrowed sash. Games were played, wrestling matches, blindfolded chases. Simple songs echoed over fields. And for those few hours, the burdens lifted. The manor might even send ale or bread as a gesture of goodwill. Sometimes, the lord and lady watched from a distance, or joined the dance with practiced grace. Fairs were rarer still, larger than feast days, and louder. Traveling merchants brought cloth from Flanders, salt from France, trinkets from towns far beyond the fields. Coins jingled, chickens clucked. News passed between strangers like sparks. And at the heart of it all, laughter. Children tried honey cakes for the first time. Old men told the same joke. Again. Young girls swapped flower crowns and shy glances. The feast itself might include roast meat, a true luxury, hearty stew, fresh bread, and for once, more than enough. It did not last long. By evening, fires dimmed, the tables emptied. Tomorrow would bring labor again, but the memory lingered. A shared joke, a bruised knee from dancing, a bit of leftover sweet tucked away for the morning. In those hours, peasants were more than laborers. They were part of a rhythm larger than work, a world that knew joy, however brief. And in remembering these days, not just the toil, we honor the full shape of their lives, not just bowed backs, but lifted faces. To live as a medieval peasant was to live within a system, not one explained with scrolls or school books, but one understood through experience, repetition, and quiet enforcement. The manor was more than just a lord home. It was the center of control, a symbol, a presence, a weight that settled over every peasant's life. Peasants rarely spoke to the Lord directly. More often, they dealt with his reeve, a fellow villager chosen to carry out his will. The reeve was both neighbor and enforcer. He knew your debts. He knew if you skipped work. He knew if your fence wasn't mended. Rent was often paid not in coin, but in labor. 3 days a week, you might work your own plot. The rest, the Lord's. Harvest his grain, mend his fences, shear his sheep. Even weddings required permission. Even widows owed fines. There was a rule for everything, but rarely was it written. Instead, it passed from parent to child like the sound of rain on thatch. Constant, accepted, unchallenged. Some peasants were freemen, with a bit more control. Others were villains, tied to the land. They could not leave without approval, could not marry outside the manor, without paying for the right. And yet, this system had its own balance. The Lord protected his peasants, or was supposed to. He provided justice, settled disputes, guarded the land in times of threat. In return, the peasants gave service, goods, and loyalty. Sometimes the rules were bent. A kind steward might forgive a debt. A hard winter might soften a tax, but not always. Disputes were settled in the manor court, a weekly or seasonal gathering where neighbors judged neighbors. A stolen goose, an unpaid rent, a broken oath. Punishments were often mild. A fine, a public scolding, the loss of grazing rights. But the message was clear. Order must be preserved. Still within the strict frame, peasants built lives. They laughed. They loved. They mourned. They hoped. Power did not always shout. Sometimes it whispered through the shape of a road, the toll for a mill, the rights to collect firewood. And yet they endured. They adapted, negotiated, resisted quietly, or endured loudly. And though they never wrote their own laws, they learned to live between the lines. Their world was bound by rules, but their hearts, their joys, their hands, still found room to be free. And now, we return to stillness. The village is quiet. The hearth has cooled. The sounds of the fields, the lowing of cattle, the creak of wooden carts, have faded into night. You walk through the daily life of a medieval peasant, risen with them beneath a smoky roof, work the earth beneath their tired hands, listen to the soft stories whispered by their bones and broken tools, and watch the contrast of banquet and bowl, lord and laborer. You've seen their joys, brief, flickering, but full, their constraints, silent, subtle, but lasting, their world, simple, but never small. In many ways, their lives were hard, but also steady, rooted, connected to land, to season, to one another. There is something deeply calming about such a life. Not easy, but rhythmic, predictable. The same tasks, the same paths, a closeness with the natural world many of us have forgotten. And while we rest tonight, surrounded by modern comforts, we can still hear faintly the echo of their footsteps on worn village paths. So now, let the mind wander gently back through time, through fields and fairs, through kitchens and courts, through the small and the ordinary, the real texture of forgotten lives. Let their rhythm become your rhythm. Let their calm settle into your breath. This has been a boring history for sleep. A quiet tale for quiet hours. A soft-spoken journey into the past. Not to excite, but to soothe. Not to remember every fact, but to feel the hush of time. Thank you for listening. Sleep well, traveler of history. The village will still be there tomorrow. Good night.